Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. I'm Fine Biometrics Editor-in-Chief Alex Perala.
And I'm Fine Biometrics Communications Director, Tony Bitsionis. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, Tony?
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
So we're here to talk about some big news from the past week. What do you want to talk about?
I think the first story that jumps out to me, because we've covered this topic so much, is to do with BIPA, the Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act, a major piece of legislation in the US. And the story in question regards advancing to make some changes to BIPA that could potentially weaken it. And I wanted to get your experienced take on what is going on there. Specifically, first off, most importantly, what's going on, and if it is as I think it is, why would the state of Illinois be interested in weakening such a major piece of legislation?
Yeah. Listeners probably are going to know what BIPA is, but just to give a little overview, it's a very strict privacy regulation focused on biometric privacy in the state of Illinois. The general idea is to get people's consent, fully informed consent, when their biometric info is collected, and to let them know how it's going to be used and stored and secured and stuff like that. But the law has become kind of notorious because so many companies have run afoul of it, and it's generated a lot of high-profile lawsuits against major tech companies, Google, Facebook, pretty much like any tech company you want to name has got a BIPA lawsuit. So it has been scaring businesses and tech companies for years. And I guess a key thing we need to know is that it's unique, I believe, in having a private, what's the word called? It's like a right of action on the part of consumers, meaning it's not up to some authority to enforce it. It's anybody can just file a lawsuit. And so it's led to these huge class action lawsuits, and that's why some wanted to kind of weaken it somewhat. I'm not sure weaken is even the right word to describe what they're trying to do, because the amendment, it's really just changing a bit of a technicality in how it can be enforced, but it's an important one. So what it did is previously, well, actually, this is still the case. Under BIPA, a company that violates BIPA can be charged, can face a fine for every instance in which it has recorded or collected somebody's biometric information. So if they're using a fingerprint-based time and attendance system, every time an employee scans their fingerprint counts as a violation and a potential fine. So that is the thing that they have changed in this bill that the Senate just passed. And it basically is now what they're trying to do is change the law so that a company will still be collecting the data, but not for every single time they use it, if that makes sense. So yeah, so enrolling somebody is the thing that triggers a violation, not actually scanning their fingerprint a second, third, fourth time.
Right. So if I'm a victim of having my biometric information collected unknowingly, it doesn't matter how many times it was collected, more so that it was collected in the first place. And so I couldn't hold them accountable for 5 instances of my fingerprint or my face being collected without me knowing. It would just be the fact that they did it the one time. That's what the legislation is changing.
Yeah, and I guess to be clear, the way it works, this is a bill that has passed the Senate and now it has to go to the House. And the way the lawmakers involved were talking about it was like they seem to think it's probably going to go through the House and it's probably going to pass, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it's going to change, assuming it goes through. And I guess like the goal is to really stop, I don't know if you could say nuisance lawsuits, but it's not going to be these huge payouts for like, again, a small company using a fingerprint scanner to clock in and out. You, as an employee, it's just not going to be worth your while to sue them because you can't get a fine for every single violation.
Right.
So yeah.
So
every single scan.
So is that, it makes it sound like this change will protect some of the smaller companies that otherwise would be on the hook for, if you have 10 employees and all 10 of them are scanned 5 times, then you're on the hook for 50 infractions as opposed to 10. Is it too conspiratorial to think that some of these huge tech companies like Google and Facebook and TikTok and all, you name it, they've been on the receiving end of BIPA lawsuits over the last several years, that they had something to do with this change? Because you mentioned payouts, and there have been some massive payouts over the years that I've read about. So yeah,
it's never. I don't think, like, my bias is it's never really too conspiratorial to think a major tech company is involved in lobbying. So like, I'm sure that's true, but that having been said, from what I understand, the push, at least the way it's been reported, the push has really come from like smaller and medium-sized businesses in Illinois. Like the groups that were lobbying were the Illinois Manufacturers Association and the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. So it doesn't sound to me like these are big pushes from like Google or Meta. It's collections of businesses in the state who are concerned about how BIPA could potentially impact them or has impacted them.
Right. That makes sense. So in your opinion, like, what does this mean for Illinoisans, I think is how you would say that. And in general, just digital privacy advocates. Is this a loss? Is it just a natural evolution of a piece of legislation that has been around for a while, but is still not very widely known outside of Illinois? Does this point to potential future expansion to other states or maybe nationwide?
I guess I see it as like a natural evolution, because it was pretty strict. Like it's pretty strict the way it is, and from my perspective, especially for like a smaller company, if you're an employee and you get involved in a class action and you get involved in something that's gonna maybe like bankrupt the company, and the end result is you get a $500 check, like that's not really good for anybody. So I mean, that's just hypothetical, but looking at the big picture, it is, I think this is quite important symbolically. BIPA had been kind of notorious as creating a cottage industry for lawyers who, and some law firms have been actively like canvassing people, saying like, hey, did you ever get your fingerprint scanned? Get in touch. We can put together a class action lawsuit. So it seems like it was, I mean, I care about consumer privacy. It does seem like this law reached a little too far to me in that direction. And I think this is a good way to tweak it without just gutting it. But like, we'll have to see. I mean, I don't know if the people who drafted the law expected it to play out the way it has the last several years, but I'm hopeful that it'll continue to be like a good symbolic like a good example of the kind of law you want in place without being so draconian that it just destroys businesses in the
Yeah,
state and leads to a bunch of nuisance lawsuits.
that's a good way of looking at it. Yeah. I mean, just thinking back over the years, having written about BIPA myself a few times and reading dozens of stories on both of our sites on Find Biometrics and Mobile ID World about BIPA cases, there's been like a pretty impressive variety of not only companies but just cases, specific cases. Like I can remember a casino in Illinois that used facial recognition as their new loyalty, not loyalty program, but to replace those silly plastic lanyards people wear around their necks that they feed into slot machines to collect points. This casino decided to use facial recognition instead, and that was obviously a violation of BIPA. Companies from Dr. Pepper to Home Depot to all the major players in tech have all been
What a
in
bagel.
What a Bagel, yeah, notorious What a Bagel, who's always threatening my security. They've also been in there. So yeah, my question is just for you personally, do you have like a favorite case or one that has stood out over the years that you think, for whatever reason, either the scariest or the most entertaining or the most just that stood out to you? And what is it?
I think that there's like in general, there's a group of cases that I think are kind of funny that are about virtual try-on tools where it's just you're getting hair dye, you're ordering hair dye online and it shows you what color your hair would look like. And like those have like led to BIPA lawsuits because it is like analyzing your face in a
Right.
system. And it did lead to like one of the most absurd outcomes of one of these cases was one of these virtual try-on things was filed against Christian Dior, the fashion brand.
Right.
And it was for like they were selling glasses and people could see what their face would look like with that
Right. I've
pair of
seen those.
glasses online.
Yeah.
And there's the way they fought the lawsuit was that there's an exemption, pardon me, for healthcare providers under BIPA.
Okay.
Like they're kind of protected from the act to some degree. And so Dior was like, well, these are glasses to help people see. So it's kind of a healthcare
Right.
thing that we're doing. And like the judge agreed. And
Anytime I'm thinking of my eye care, the first name that comes into my mind is Christian Dior. So
yeah.
I get it. That makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely, most of us are familiar with those sites where you can virtually try on glasses. I don't know about hair dye, but I guess that makes sense too. So you would think that when opting into that, there would be some sort of a pop-up or dialog box that tells you that your camera is going to be accessed by this site. People,
yeah,
I guess that wasn't added in, or who knows, but
I don't know, but that kind of goes back to why BIPA is so problematic, because again and again I see coming up in these cases the language is excuse me, the language is the company failed to get written consent.
right.
And like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, I guess it doesn't mean checking a box.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a high standard. So,
Right.
and I don't think that's changing. I think that language is staying in BIPA. So,
Yeah.
we'll see if it's really so much weaker going forward.
They should take a page out of the book of in my opinion, the kings of express written consent, and that's Major League Baseball. It's been their phrase for a very long time that you may not rebroadcast any Major League Baseball games without their express written consent. So for the same people who are reaching out to the MLB for that consent, they should be on the horn with them to get some BIPA advice. That's just my 2 cents.
Always talk to the baseball guys.
Always talk to the baseball guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on from BIPA, a natural progression, if you ask me, to one of my other favorite topics is almost anything to do with North Korea. And another story this week, a big story for us, was from a website called 38 North. So I'm going to ask you about them in a sec, but the story involves North Korea looking to build out its surveillance infrastructure, which caught my attention because it's a scary thought. I just assume that their surveillance infrastructure is already pretty robust. I have never been to North Korea. I don't know.
Same.
I don't know about you. Oh, okay, yeah, you either, yeah. But what's going on there? They're looking to build out their infrastructure. I already assumed they had some sort of heavy surveillance on their citizens. And who is 38 North, or what is 38 North? The blog or site that reported this.
Yeah. So yeah, first of all, I don't know how much we can really talk about this because it's so hard to know what's really going on in North Korea. But I did want to talk about it because that in itself is interesting to me. And I just love, like, I'm very interested in geopolitics.
Mhm.
So, and there's some of that going on here. So 38 North, I mean, the story is not about them. The story is by them, but they did catch my attention because I was like, how do they know that this is happening? What is this outlet? Never heard of this media outlet before. I looked into them. They are owned by the Stimson Group, which is, or sorry, pardon me, they're owned by the Stimson Center, which describes itself as a research institution that's focused on, like, basically promoting peace. And they don't seem sketchy or anything. They're just like they are like an odd group. They're not a traditional media company. They seem to have some inside info about North Korea, and they also they publicly disclose their donors. I think I read on their website that at least their most recent fiscal year they had they made $12 million, and they had expenses of 10 million. So I don't know how much of the revenues come from donations. Oh, quite a lot. I'm checking their website now.
That's that real-time
Like,
research.
yeah, 7.5 million in grants and contributions. And when you look at who is contributing, it's a long list.
Oh boy.
It's
Are we breaking news right now? Is this
no. We're just doing
we're just
we're
reading it?
just researching the researchers. The Australian government has
Oh,
donated a small amount. The American Bar Association, Boeing Japan, oddly,
okay.
donated to them. The Embassy of Japan,
Oh,
and the Embassy of the State of Qatar.
oh,
Uh,
Qatar. Yeah.
Qatar, yeah. Government of Canada gave over 1 million. Uh, I don't want to go through the whole list. Meta, of course, Meta has their hands in everything. So, I think this is just a group who's getting a lot of funding from maybe tech companies, Western governments, Asian governments that are concerned about what's going on geopolitically. And so they use this funding to get, I guess, inside information. I don't know how they get it,
Yeah.
but I think it's cool. And so they figured out that North Korea is bulking up its internal surveillance infrastructure, including using facial recognition, and they're getting it from China. And that's just noteworthy because that stuff is banned here. A lot of Chinese firms have been blacklisted by Western governments, most notably the US. And they're really sophisticated. They're among the top vendors in terms of like accuracy
Mhm.
and technical sophistication. So Hikvision and SenseTime and MEGV are the big ones, I would say, and they were blacklisted, I want to say in 2019
The
under the Trump
Uyghur.
administration.
Mhm.
About the I don't know how to pronounce that. Uyghur.
Uyghur, yeah.
Yeah, the Muslim ethnic group in the province of Xinjiang in China
Right.
have been allegedly very severely repressed by the
Mhm.
Chinese government. And the US government and its allies say that these companies provided surveillance technology to the Chinese government in that effort. So they were blacklisted under Trump. The Biden administration maintained the blacklist, and I think even expanded it.
Mhm.
So yeah, so China doesn't have, or these companies don't have like access to the global market, and I suppose to some degree they might be getting help from the Chinese government to get access to markets like North Korea.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean those countries, China and North Korea, they're longtime allies. They're also kind of stuck with each other to a certain degree, and it makes sense. It's a natural partnership. It helps these Chinese companies get contracts, I suppose, and also just extends China's surveillance apparatus just further into new territory where presumably the Chinese government is still going to be able to have some kind of leverage. I don't know what kind of spy capabilities they have through
Right.
these cameras, but I think it's fair to assume they have some ability to use the cameras or leverage them somehow, even if it's not in Chinese territory. I don't know. I'm
Right.
speculating a little bit here.
Right. Well, I
I'm
mean,
interested.
when talking about North Korea, a lot of it has to be speculation, just because it's North Korea.
So yeah, I'm not sure how much more there is to really say about this, but I do, just speaking of geopolitics, I want to bring up one other thing involving China that we covered this week. This really has nothing to do with this, but I just find it really interesting. When I was writing our weekly AI update, I learned that TSMC, the chip maker that's very involved in making AI chips,
Yeah.
they're in Taiwan, and everybody's worried about Taiwan,
Mhm.
who's paying attention. And I think it's pretty widely expected that China's going to invade or somehow like annex Taiwan pretty soon, by the end of the decade, I think most people seem to believe. And so I think TSMC has a lot of customers who are asking it to start making chips outside of Taiwan. And they came out in an earnings call, and the CEO was like, any customer who wants us to make chips and build infrastructure outside of Taiwan is going to have to pay a little extra. Like this can't be on
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was
That's
amazing. Like
yeah.
they're like, look, we know we're going to be invaded.
Yeah.
It's going to cost us a lot of money to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going to defend us, then at least help us pay
Yeah.
to get our facilities like abroad. Like that's pretty
kind of
amazing.
bold and clever, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are more than a few that would answer that call in the next few years. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's kind of
pay up
crazy.
or shut up.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about something before we wrap up here.
Yeah, I hope it is what I think it is.
It is.
Okay.
It is the paintball equipped smart
Yeah,
doorbell.
that's it. Yeah.
Is it a doorbell?
No, it's not a doorbell. It's much
Camera?
worse. It's so it's called Paint Cam.
Okay.
And I did a little bit of digging, not too much digging, but the company behind it is a Slovenian company called Oz IT.
Okay.
So not Australian, but nonetheless, it's called Oz IT. And they did a Kickstarter for this product called Paint Cam. Now, Oz IT's website is entirely just a sales page for the Paint Cam. In fact, I don't know if you can see behind me in my background, but that's what we're looking at there.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they did a Kickstarter. Now, there's not much info on the Kickstarter page about Oz IT other than they say that they have 15 years of experience in government security in Slovenia. They don't specify in Slovenia, but they're based in a city in Slovenia that I've never heard of, and 20 years in software development. So what the Paint Cam is a camera that looks pretty much like a regular camera that has AI powered facial recognition, and it has a area detection feature, and it can shoot paintballs and or tear gas canisters at intruders who do not fit into your, I guess, pre-supplied list of people that are okay to be on your premises. So the most interesting thing here is just I can't. This was a late discovery for me because I wrote the article, I read the source material, and I was just digging around their website, and there's a list of videos at the bottom, and one of them is titled Paint Cam Movie, and it's about 2 minutes long, but I think it's fairly well shot. I mean, decent quality little movie there, and it's narrated by, I'm doing air quotes here, Eve. Eve is the name of the camera. So Eve is narrating this movie, and she's talking about her creator, Bob, who created her to protect his home and his family. And so the movie shows Bob sitting in his suburban house with his wife and kids watching TV late at night, and, you know, like a cartoon burglar with a, you know, a watcher's cap on, or whatever you call those wool sailors caps, breaking into his house and stealing a very expensive looking piece of fine art. And then the Eve camera prompts him, like something out of RoboCop. It says, "You're not authorized to be here. You have 5 seconds to leave the premises." Doesn't say anything about dropping the painting, so I guess if the criminal can get off the property with the painting in 5 seconds, then it's his. And the criminal does not comply, and then the camera shoots a paintball at him and hits him, and then he runs away, lights him up. Doesn't show anything about the tear gas canisters, and when you click on the little on their product page, there's like a little question mark next to tear gas canisters. It goes nowhere. In fact, none of the little dialogue boxes on their site are interactable. It's just one long scrolly product page, kind of like when you see like for a new iPhone or something, you just keep scrolling and showing different features. It's the quality of their site is great. I don't know how legitimate this is. I don't know how legitimate they are. It's definitely a product that is going to be for sale. They have little forms that you can fill out or put your email address in to get 40% off and be notified when the product is launched, along with a lot of other confusing stuff like the screenshot that you see behind me, the different tiers of paint cams, excuse me, that you can purchase. There's standard, advanced, and elite. And for standard and advanced, they appear to not have animal detection or face detection. So I don't know how a camera that fires paintballs at intruders can really operate without face detection or animal detection. I guess that just means it's going to fire it at
whoever shows up.
Whoever shows up, which really is seen out of RoboCop. But yeah, it's a camera that will shoot intruders with paint and possibly also tear gas canisters, which I guess means it would fill your property with tear gas. It seems kind of insane to me, but I wouldn't be surprised if they sell a few and they end up having to violate a bunch of laws. I don't know. You might know a little bit more about potential violation of laws for this. I can't imagine that it's legal to just shoot. Well, you never know. Depends on where you are.
Florida, it might be.
Yeah, I think Florida, maybe a few states, they'd be okay with that.
Illinois, no.
I can't imagine, you know, a densely populated city with these things mounted on your front door, just firing away at people walking by on the sidewalk. There's got to be some sort of law preventing you from just. That would
be a very colorful city.
It would be very colorful. Well done. And yeah, I mean, if anything, I would love to see this technology applied to some sort of a reality show. You know, American Gladiators with AI-powered paintball cameras, tear gas cameras, even. Why not?
Should we contribute to the Kickstarter?
Oh yeah, I already did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And I was
wondering what that charge was on the corporate card.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I should have asked first, but I knew I knew your interest before I made that donation.
I try not to look at that stuff.
Yeah, but probably a smart idea.
Well, okay, well that's terrifying, and I really appreciate that update on home security, physical access.
Yeah.
Um, and I look forward to receiving our Eve Pro
Yeah.
door cam.
Yeah, sorry, I did go with the lowest tier one, so it won't have any facial recognition capabilities. So next time you come over, just be very careful.
Yeah, well, in a way that'll be even more interesting. On that note, this has been the ID Talk podcast. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned to Find Biometrics and Mobile ID World for all the latest news about biometrics and digital identity technology. And check out our websites. And while you're there, click the subscribe to our newsletter link to get regular updates right into your inbox. Tony, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Alex. It was great. Yeah. See you, buddy.